السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. أكثر من 21 مليون يمني بحاجة للمساعدة الإنسانية العاجلة، وما يقارب 13 مليونا منهم مهددون بالمجاعة، بينهم 1,800,000 طفل يمني. هي الصورة القاتمة في اليمن اليوم، أزمة الغذاء وتفاقمها وانعدامه بسبب العدوان السعودي، والكارثة الإنسانية في اليمن من الداخل. معكم زينب صفار، تابعونا. لا تبذر في الطعام لأن أطفالا كثرا يموتون من الجوع، هي مقولة لطالما رددها الأهل على مسامع أولادهم في الكثير من البيوت، وهي واقع تجسد في مأساة أطفال اليمن اليوم، إذ ما يقارب 1,800,000 طفل يمني يعانون سوء التغذية عام 2015، وأكثر من نصف مليون من هؤلاء الأطفال عرضة لخطر سوء التغذية الحاد نهاية هذا العام. ما يزيد الطين بلة أن الطفولة في اليمن تتعرض لعدوان مباشر، فمنذ اندلاع العدوان بقيادة السعودية على اليمن وتفاقمه 400 طفل يمني على الأقل لاقوا حتفهم، وأكثر من 620 آخرين جرحوا، أي ما يقارب 3 أطفال يقتلون كل يوم، وهو عدد أعلى 4 أضعاف من عدد الأطفال الذين قتلوا في اليمن عام 2014. وليس من المستغرب أن تقديرات فرق حماية الطفل في اليونسف الأخيرة تشير إلى أن معظم الأطفال في اليمن يعيشون تحت ضغط هائل من جراء العدوان، وما يقارب من 4 من كل 5 أطفال متضررون قالوا إنهم يخشون اللعب في العراء. اليوم 400 مدرسة تضررت من القصف منذ آذار المنصرم، 95 منها دمرت كليا، بينما 3600 مدرسة على الأقل أغلقت أبوابها في البلاد، ما سيؤدي إلى بقاء ملايين الأطفال اليمنيين بدون تعليم ويهدد مستقبلهم بلا شك. الأستاذة البريطانية مارثا مندي المتخصصة بأنثروبولوجيا البلاد العربية، لا سيما اليمن وسوريا والأردن والعراق وفلسطين، تحدثنا أكثر من الداخل عن أزمة الغذاء في اليمن، والتي تعود إلى تراكمات سابقة وقد تفاقمت بفعل العدوان الأخير على اليمن، وعن الإبادة الجماعية وجرائم الحرب بحق الإنسانية في اليمن، لا سيما الأطفال، وغياب هذه الجريمة عن التغطية والمناقشة في الدوائر السياسية والإعلامية العالمية. Professor Mارثا Mandi, specialist in the anthropology of the Arab world with special focus on Yemen, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, and Palestine. Welcome to the Inside, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be with you this afternoon.
It's our pleasure, ma'am. Your first major work, field work actually, was in Yemen back in 1973 to 1977. What can you tell us from your own perspective? How can you give us an overview of what type of society is the Yemeni society, and why were you, Professor Mandi, inclined to study Yemen as your first field major work?
Well, Yemen had been relatively understudied, but I went on a trip just to see, because actually I'd had a tutor who had introduced me, a geography tutor, when I was doing my Arabic studies in Oxford, and she showed me pictures of Yemen, so I had Yemen in my head. And a few years later I had the chance in 71 to go and visit in the summer and travel around, and it was a wonderful trip, and the road between, for example, Eb and Sana'a was still not paved, but Sana'a was extraordinary in those years, even though it had suffered much in the Yemeni Revolutionary War, 62 to the late 60s, 71 was the final calming. So I decided that I wanted to try to work on the kinds of themes I was interested in, which were rural society and social structure, that I worked under the direction of the Center for Yemeni Research, not under a foreign research body. And it allowed me, I could take my time in the old days, and it allowed me to get a sense of more than one Yemen. Particularly, I worked outside Sana'a in the mountains. I lived, and I took my time. I didn't do much formal interviewing because Yemen is a society that's been historically very decentralized, and knowledge is a form of power, so one doesn't push. And so the basic unit out of which mountain Yemeni society was built in the area, and it is that, I mean, that area north of Sana'a and well, down to the Mar, which is generally regarded as tribal, whereas lower Yemen, Ebda, is much more a peasant culture without such strong local organization. But I look very much at what were the legal mechanisms that sustained this form of village, and what was the role of the sheikh, and how were quasi-legal decisions taken and then negotiated with state authorities, and what was the role of the Shara al-Islami in local lawmaking as well, and so how this worked together. Now, I also, because I took my time to rewrite that as a book, that research.
Yes, also you have talked a lot and extensively in your research studies in Yemen, and in co-authoring many of the chapters about Yemen, you have talked about a food crisis that has long spread over Yemen, and of course, as has been observed, the crisis is much exacerbated by the shutting down of basic supplies like fuel, electricity and some foodstuffs following the political challenge in 2011-2012, and also with the Saudi-led aggression against Yemen and the people of Yemen. But its core elements antedate the present political challenges. How do you explain the starkness of the food crisis in Yemen?
Yes, in recent years I went back to, because I had a long period working, and I still do, working on the northern Arab countries, Syria, Jordan, and now again Lebanon a bit. I went back to try to understand the question you just posed. What had happened to Yemeni agriculture? Because when I knew it in the period of the 1970s, Yemen was 85% autosufficient in basic grains, not in all foods. And today, I mean, today, my God, we don't quite know. But just before this war, in 2012, the statistics were already terrible. Today, 60% of the population is in need. But
or 80%,
or
actually.
80%,
yes.
yeah. So essentially, by looking at the evidence and also by working with two agronomists, one a Yemeni, Amin al-Hakimi, and the other Frédéric Pellard, who is a French agronomist but who had worked for over a decade in Yemen, I came to understand how the basic food production of Yemen had been so damaged. Now, there's of course a lot of population growth in Yemen, that's another factor, but the changes within the agricultural sector themselves. Furthermore, as the years went on of the Ali Abdallah regime, you had elements of the core elite and, in fact, the extended family of Ali Abdallah himself, Abdallah Saleh himself, by the end, taking over what had been once established as military supply, so to speak, for the people. That is to say, you had the elite and even members of the very closely associated with the government, in charge of the companies that imported food and that distributed all the way down the line. So you had a very difficult situation for the small farmer. Farming became feminized to a certain degree, but so you've had a loss of rain-fed agriculture of about a half. The refuge of farmers was to go into qat farming, which has no external, and to develop irrigation through pump wells, all of which are leading to a major water crisis in Yemen.
That still exists today.
That is terrible. today.
But allow me here, Dr. Mārthā, just to read some observations more about Yemen today. This food crisis just exacerbated. Quote, in March 2012, the World Food Programme stated that between 1/5 and 1/4 of the Yemeni population required emergency food aid, and that no response had been forthcoming to Oxfam's call. The levels of child malnutrition and emergent hunger are comparable to, or even worse, than those in Afghanistan, where nearly half the children are underweight. Thus, the WFP states that 10 million Yemenis, nearly half of the population, are food insecure. What's going on?
Well, it is...
This is the situation also now.
It is far worse now.
Yes.
I mean, we are facing what are essentially major war crimes, because you cannot use food and fuel, according to international humanitarian law, as weapons of war. Whereas they are being used as weapons of war. There is a blockade on Yemen. There was a blockade agreed on the import of arms shipments, but not on basic food.
And they rely on 90% of the food is imported.
Yes, we have reports from Oxfam, from USAID has a famine watch blog, or give you the link. You can get estimates of the level of suffering, but essentially the level of suffering is unimagiable, and that's what the local journalists and local people say. And we don't even know how this is going to translate over a period of time, because one doesn't have the reports from the ground about that. So essentially this must be lifted immediately.
The blockade.
Yes, of course.
Okay. Dr. Mārthā, allow us to stop now for a short break, and then we will detail more on the different facets of this humanitarian crisis that is just exacerbating, getting worse and worse across all Yemen. إذا فاصل قصير ونعود. لا تذهبوا بعيدا. بعد أكثر من 8 أشهر من القصف الجوي بقيادة السعودية على اليمن، فإن حوادث مثل استهداف الأعراس والتي راح ضحيتها مؤخرا 130 شخصا قد أصبحت مألوفة بنحو مقيت، هذا إضافة إلى استهداف المدارس. حتى الآن أكثر من 2400 مدني قتلوا منذ بدء العدوان في نهاية آذار المنصرم بحسب الأمم المتحدة. كلير تالم، مديرة منطقة الشرق الأوسط وشمال أفريقيا في المنظمة العالمية لحقوق الإنسان، قالت: من الجلي أن الدول التي توفر المعلومات الاستخبارية والدعم للتحالف بما فيها الولايات المتحدة قد تتهم بالتواطؤ في جرائم حرب. كذلك فإن منظمة العفو الدولية بيّنت ما أطلقت عليها جرائم حرب مرتكبة من قبل التحالف في صعدة. كذلك مركز كارنيجي للشرق الأوسط قال إن الدعم غير المشروط الذي توفره الولايات المتحدة والمملكة المتحدة ودول غربية أخرى للتحالف قد أتاح المجال للسعوديين في أن يكونوا أكثر إمعانا في الدمار باستخدام القوة المفرطة. الأستاذة مارثا مندي، المتخصصة في أنثروبولوجيا العالم العربي، تحدثنا عن التبعات التي ستخلفها سياسة الأرض المحروقة في اليمن على المدى البعيد.
So it's very difficult to speak of the future. One needs to think of the present and of ceasing this and moving towards political talk, and to somehow frighten the powers that are backing Saudi Arabia in this, which certainly include Britain and France, not only the United States of America, and probably behind the scenes Israel, because we certainly know in good authority that they were asked by the US to give intelligence at the very least, and there are of course other reports.
And you have talked in one of your articles about that.
Yes, in the article on Counterpunch. I've tried to think about that, in particular in relationship to some of the wilder aspects of this war, whereby it appeared that somehow the Gulf powers, because it's not only Saudi Arabia, it's also the Emirates and Qatar and Kuwait and so forth, not Oman of course, who are involved in this, were somehow persuaded that this would be a bloodless war for them. So when they lost a number of troops in Mara province some month and more ago, they went wild. I mean, this was simply not on the cards. So how this, I don't believe that there was no foreplanning here. I mean, that it's just sort of evolved as a reaction. I believe there was some foreplanning, just as there was for Medinat al-Nur and for the Nur Bridge, but some of this
between Djibouti
and
Yemen,
foci around Bab el-Mandeb, which Ansar Allah, i.e. the Houthis and the government had never threatened. I mean, international, but there were wild dreams that somehow were, in a sense, promoted or sold. There was a strong statement from the European Parliament in early July, which got no coverage whatsoever, by the way, and which addressed some of these issues. There have been letters by a group of us academics from the practically the very beginning of this conflict, but it seems that the decisions are being taken at a certain military level whereby they, just as bombing the MSF hospital in Kunduz, as though these powers believe that they are totally above the law in any form and moral obligation. And it simply makes no sense, even for Saudi Arabia in the long term, because and this is where I think finally some of the regime intellectuals, if you want to put it that way, in the West, particularly in the US, are beginning to get worried. Because what will happen if you absolutely destroy the country of Yemen? It's just going to quietly die, so to speak. This will create reverberations for generations to come.
True.
And since there's been so much destruction of infrastructure, and you are brutalizing people, and we all know that if you brutalize people in the wars, I mean, Yemen was distinguished, let's think just back a few years, in the movements in 2011, 2012, even after Ansar Allah came in to Sana'a, they came in relatively without a shot, right? Parts of the army went over to them, and they also came in on the back of popular demands, such as against the fuel hike. And then there was a peace and national dialogue. I mean, the Yemenis didn't use violence in their uprising against the regime, and they also talked to each other time and again, under UN auspices and outside of UN auspices. And it is that potential of Yemen that might yet save it. But I mean, people cannot be brutalized to this extent
because
without breaking people. We know that historically.
Right. An observer also said that this war is not, if you just talk to the civilians, both the Sunnis and the Shia, they would say that this war is an economic, a political war, but it's not a sectarian war. And they have been using, the international actors, these local issues, in order to provoke. Well, and to show it and to sell it as a sectarian war.
The whole coverage in the Western media, and this applied even to good newspapers.
If there is any coverage in the Western media.
I'm talking over the last couple of years, okay, not even before. As, Yemen started to be treated in the guise, so to speak, of Iraq or the sectarianism of good old Lebanon here. Whereas this is ridiculous. I mean, the Zaydis and the Shafi'is are simply not, sort of proxies for Twelver Shiism and Wahhabism or whatever, whereas, of course, this war is unintelligible once you start trying to put it into those terms, and the Western media, at least, has been doing that consistently. Clearly, when you have violence, and one knows that from all the wars of the region, whether it's Iraq or here or Syria, when you have enormous violence, people will, tend, and you destroy state institutions, people tend to have to kind of lock in to certain forms of identitarian clustering.
Yeah, Dr. Mارثا, the childhood is also under attack in Yemen. And the facts are very chilling. Overall, around 1.8 million children are likely to suffer from some form of malnutrition this year alone, an increase of almost 12 million from the previous year, which is 2014. Over 500,000 of these children will be at a risk of severe acute malnutrition in 2015. Also, the Yemen Ministry of Health recently reported that more than 650 types of medicines have disappeared from the domestic market due to the blockade, and 900 health facilities closed since late March. Yemen's children did not start this war, but they are bearing the brunt of this war and the consequences of this war. What can be done vis-a-vis this status quo? I mean, not by the government, but you know, the people at least, the civil society networks. How are we going to help this mass genocide? You know,
because of the coalition blockade, we can't help them at the moment. That is where the war crime is. Thereafter, personally, I've tried, and my speaking here today with you is not because I'm a political or an aid worker. It's because I'm a concerned person who knows something and knows something of the history of the country. If you brutalize children, and they survive, the same is true of Syria. You know, this will mark the country for a very long time to come. Schools are closed. I've seen a Kwashiorka child in Yemen in the old days. You don't see that and ever forget it. You don't see a child who's dying like that of malnutrition and ever forget what the child looks like. It's one thing to see it in pictures. It's another to see the actual child, you know, dying like that. So it is absolutely vital. But I mean, the other Arab countries too have been either involved in support or silent, practically, partly because they have their own fights on. But I think that if this stops, then a totally new policy for aid needs to be developed. We need to go back to the years. I mean, in fact, in the demonstrations, they held up the pictures of Ibrahim al-Hamdi, who was the only president who was backing, you know, collective organization in the villages, the cooperative movement. You need to rethink development policies for poor countries, the destruction of great historical monuments, of great historical cities, of
the history and the culture of the people,
of the universities, the research centers, the schools. I mean, these are of course also war crimes.
Right, Professor Mارثا, Mandi, specialist in the anthropology of the Arab world. Many thanks indeed for joining us.
Many thanks to you, and I hope that my anger and passion about what is happening in Yemen didn't confuse the clarity of my remarks.
You're most welcome, ma'am. It was very clear. إذن لقاء جديد في الأسبوع المقبل مع ضيف جديد وقضية جديدة ودائما من الداخل. للمزيد من التواصل بريدنا @inside@almayadin.net وصفحتنا على الفيسبوك من الداخل. من كل فريق عمل من الداخل من كل الميادين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.